Welcome back. Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, he unseated Nan Hayworth in New York's Hudson Valley in a closely watched congressional election back in 2012. Now, he was sworn in January of this year. Since then, he's gotten a crash course in congressional action, or maybe a better way to say it is inaction, depending on who you ask. Now, we spoke to him earlier today about a host of issues, including the impact of the sequester and on handling homophobia. We began by asking why, even after Newtown, it's been so difficult to pass gun control legislation. Here's part of that conversation.
The problem is that you have real extremists on both sides, but mostly in the NRA, that won't even have a conversation about something like universal background checks. So I think the NRA has become so extreme as to become useless in this debate where serious people are trying to balance our respect for the Second Amendment and legitimate gun ownership, law-abiding gun owners who are not the problem, and respecting those rights, and I mean that seriously, with efforts that will save lives, that will prevent some of these mass killings and reduce gun violence in America, and we can do that. And I wouldn't give up hope. I think that what you're seeing is that in Washington and elsewhere, people know that we have to act, we have to do something.
I would have said you were right, certainly a week after the shootings in Newtown, that ridiculous press conference that LaPierre had, basically more guns, that's the answer to this. I thought they overplayed their hand, the app that came out. But I want to play a clip from you. This is from a colleague of yours in the House, Louis Gohmert, Republican from Texas. I want you to take a listen, and our audience, to what he had to say about the prospect of more gun regulation and the comparison he made.
Once you make it 10, then why would you draw the line at 10? What's wrong with 9 or 11? And the problem is, once you draw that limit, it's kind of like marriage. When you say it's not a man and a woman anymore, then why not have 3 men and 1 woman, or 4 women and 1 man, or why not, somebody has a love for an animal.
Okay. Yeah. But before we say this is some crankpot on the farthest edge of the radio dial,
that's funny, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
That's a sitting congressman.
Yeah, it is.
And he was talking, if he didn't get from the beginning, about the ammo clip limits, 10, for example.
Right.
He said,
right.
What I thought most telling about I'll say it, that idiot, what he had to say was, right. I checked after that statement, he wasn't condemned by a single member of Republican leadership. No one asked him from leadership to go back in front of the cameras and retract it or say that he chose his words poorly. And to me, I read that to say they don't think this political risk or downfall to let the wingnuts of the party go out and in effect speak for them. He had zero in the way of ramifications for those unbelievably moronic statements. Right. So to me, that tells me they've already staked out their political ground, and they're gonna dig in their heels. And obviously they control the House.
Well, look, you picked a colleague of mine who is, one of the most extreme members in Congress. And if the point is that there are extremists in Congress, you're right, there are. And that's a good example of it. And it's laughable.
But they're not getting slapped down by leadership. That's my point. There's always been idiots, but they didn't get to speak for the party. They're getting to now.
Well, I think the biggest problem we have in Congress right now is that this Tea Party tail is still wagging the dog. And you know this. I beat a member of Congress, Nan Hayworth, just in November, who wanted to end the guaranteed benefit of Medicare and who thought we should give huge tax cuts to multimillionaires, and who was the largest recipient of NRA money in New York. So we've got that kind of extremism right here in the Hudson Valley, and it exists on the floor of the U.S. Congress. And unfortunately, it's in the way of people of good faith doing what I'm talking about, which is saying we take the Second Amendment seriously. If you've got a gun in your house because if some guy comes over the back fence, you want to be safe. And if you're on a sales trip, you want your wife to have access to that gun to protect herself, you got no problem from me. And the Second Amendment protects your right to do that. We should say that. But we should also engage those folks who feel that way, who are members of my own family, and who I totally understand that point of view. We should say there are some things we can do.
When you hear his words, forget on the gun issue, listen, I and other people find homophobic beyond insulting, but he's castigating, putting marks on people like you and your family. I mean, I'm just saying, as dad myself, the guy says something. It would take a lot for me not to want to grab him by the collar. Do you ever get tempted when these guys proudly say this in front of a camera? Ever separate yourself? Ever make it difficult to separate yourself from lawmaker to partner and dad?
Look, there are people who are going to hate, and there are people who are going to criticize. The problem is
But
not.
you share an office with this guy. It's a little different than some idiot on a radio.
My focus is not on my family. It's on we're going to be fine. I take a lot of criticism. That comes with the territory. A lot of it's unfair. You know that going in. That's fine. That's my job in some way. I'm more worried about what attitudes like that do to families in the Hudson Valley. I'm worried that attitudes like that are going to result in 2,000 families at West Point getting furlough notices tomorrow. I'm worried that attitudes like that are going to make it harder to get clean drinking water in Hopewell Junction because they're starving the Superfund funds that would pay for it. I'm worried that attitudes like that won't get us the resources we need to get the Tappan Zee Bridge built or to get Taylor Biomass going out in Montgomery, which would be 300 jobs tomorrow. Those hurt real families that are just trying to, pay for school, play by the rules, save some money for retirement. And that's where the rubber meets the road for me. I can take the hits, I'll be fine. It's that these extreme attitudes are stopping us from working together and making progress the way we have in other periods of American history where we grew the middle class, balanced the budget the right way, and led the world. And we can do that again, but we've got to start talking to each other again.
Last question on sequestration. You already touched on it, but I think this is perception out there that says from the general public, hey, you know what, wasn't that bad, but it was a lot of much ado about nothing. But just using West Point as a specific example, tell people why there was a consequence, is a consequence, and it's affecting real people in real ways.
Right. Well, Richard, thank you for bringing up West Point. I mean, I think there's so much politics involved here, and everybody's so invested in proving their side or the other was right, that we can't just look at the facts. I don't care about being on the red team or blue team. I care about how is sequestration going to affect the Hudson Valley. And in West Point, at West Point, there are 2,000 families that are going to be furloughed. They're getting notices tomorrow on April 5th. There are another 400 families at Stewart Air National Guard Base, same thing. There are thousands of jobs affected in our region. And so I hear people out there saying, oh, it's no big deal. Well, tell that to the families at West Point. Now, we sent a letter this week to the President and to the Secretary of Defense saying the Congress has passed additional funding for the Defense Department and additional flexibility. We have got to do this smart. If we're going to take these kind of hits at West Point, for goodness sake, give us the flexibility to do it in an intelligent way that minimizes the impact on folks who are working out there and serving our country and serving these kids who are going to be putting themselves on the line for us in the future.
It's completely insane.
It's nuts, and it is the dumb decisions of the last Congress that are still affecting us today, and we got to make better choices.
Just as before I say goodbye, do I sense it's a touch of optimism that more might happen on guns than a lot of us are led to believe by the last 90 plus days, that nothing's happened to this point? You think something might be on the horizon?
I don't know is the honest answer. I sure hope so. And I sure hope that it's done in a bipartisan way, working with gun owners and with people who respect the Second Amendment so that we can do what works and save lives.
To see our entire interview, please head over to our Facebook page, facebook.com/RichardFrenchLive. We'll be right back. Stay with us.